The compilation of Final Fantasy VII is full of noteworthy and pivotal events, but few are as important as the infamous Nibelheim Incident. This event, which caused the near-complete destruction of the small mountain village of Nibelheim, set in motion a sequence of events that would leave the world of Final Fantasy VII irreparably altered. And it would also have a major impact on the lives of not just Sephiroth, but also Zack, Cloud Strife, and Tifa Lockhart. What's perhaps most curious about this event, however, is that as the compilation of Final Fantasy VII has expanded, the Nibelheim Incident has been retold numerous times. And with each retelling, new perspectives have been added as a way of introducing extra layers of detail and fleshing out the scenario. The core narrative and timeline, however, has stayed the same throughout, in spite of the numerous revisions. Sephiroth, alongside Cloud and Zack, and an unnamed Shinra infantryman, were sent to Nibelheim to investigate an increase in the volume of monsters being sighted in the area around the Mount Nibel macro reactor. And as they traversed the area, Tifa was assigned as their local guide. While investigating, Sephiroth came to learn some dark secrets hidden by Shinra that pertained to his very existence. And these secrets caused him to descend into a murderous rage, burning the town and killing its inhabitants until he was put to a stop in the depths of the reactor itself. In the aftermath, Zack and Cloud, along with many of the other surviving inhabitants, were detained for the purposes of experimentation. But some would manage to escape, and they would know the truth about what happened, or at least some parts of it. This sequence, when distilled down to its simplest form, is catalytic in nature. But when looking beyond, the Nibelheim Incident can be used as a conduit to add a great deal more context to the wider lore of Final Fantasy VII. This saw the Nibelheim Incident connected with Shinra's dark past of human experimentation, the Genesis War, the Turks, the mysterious ancient peoples known as the Cetra, a cosmic horror beyond comprehension, and even the history of the planet itself. Put simply, to understand the Nibelheim Incident is to understand the core themes that Final Fantasy VII tries to purvey. And throughout this video, we will explore, in our typical granular style, why the Nibelheim Incident has to be considered one of the most pivotal scenes in Final Fantasy history. The first recounting of the Nibelheim Incident came from Cloud in the original game, while the party was lodged in Calm following their escape from Midgar. This version of the story began with Sephiroth, Cloud, and a pair of unidentified Shinra infantry being dispatched to Cloud's hometown of Nibelheim. Their mission was to investigate the increase in monster sightings in and around the area of Mount Nibel. It did not take long for their mission to turn dangerous. En route to Nibelheim, in the pouring of rain, their transport vehicle was besieged by one of the very creatures they were sent to investigate, a large and fearsome dragon. Stepping out of the vehicle to deal with the threat, it was here that Cloud first witnessed the true power of Sephiroth, as the legendary soldier dispatched the monster without even breaking a sweat. Following this, Cloud recounted that the party was able to finally make it to Nibelheim in one piece. Here, Sephiroth and Cloud reflected on the concept of having a hometown, and Cloud was able to briefly visit his mother, whom he hadn't seen since leaving to join Soldier. It was from this conversation of family and hometowns that Sephiroth first revealed that his mother's name was in fact Jenova, a name that would soon become very, very important. Spending the night at the local inn, the following morning, Sephiroth, Cloud, and the Shinra soldiers set out for the Mako reactor. To aid them in navigating the mountain's treacherous pathways, a local tour guide was contracted, who happened to be none other than Tifa Lockhart, Cloud's childhood friend. After snapping a quick photograph of the group with a local fan of Sephiroth's, they then ascended the mountain. The subsequent journey to the reactor proved to be perilous. The path to the reactor was fraught with monsters, as was expected, but it was a sudden bridge collapse that led to the death of one of the Shinra soldiers, an event which Sephiroth had an unusually cold and pragmatic response to. But it was once the group reached the Mako reactor that things really began to unravel. Making their way to the centre of the reactor's core alone, while Tifa and the surviving Shinra soldier waited outside, it was here that Cloud and Sephiroth discovered two things. First, a sealed door engraved curiously with the name of Sephiroth's mother, Jenova, and secondly, the source of the monster infestation, a broken Mako purification tank. Setting about fixing the issue, it was at this moment that something much more horrific was stumbled upon by Sephiroth. Shinra, as a company, was known for its shady dealings and dark weapons experimentation. but what lay hidden in the Mako reactor was unlike anything either Cloud or Sephiroth had seen from the company. They found row after row of Mako tanks containing mutated humanoid monsters, put there by none other than Shinra's lead scientist, Professor Hojo. Describing this as a much more sinister version of the Mako treatment given to members of Soldier, Sephiroth began to question his own existence. Was he also the product of such experimentation? Cloud described how Sephiroth stated that he had always felt different, even from a young age. Brandishing his sword, the Masamune, Sephiroth lashed out at the pods in rage as a startled Cloud jumped out of the way. Sephiroth wondered aloud if he was any different from these monsters, his fury causing one of the tanks to burst open and reveal the grotesque monster inside, writhing in a pool of Mako. Upon returning to the village, Cloud described how Sephiroth holed himself up inside the local landmark known as the Shinra Manor. Sephiroth spent days in the derelict mansion, poring over the scientist's abandoned research notes, searching for answers to his existential questions. What Sephiroth discovered in those files changed him forever. Sephiroth had come to understand that Jenova was not just the name of his mother, but also the namesake of the Jenova Project, an attempt by Shinra professors Gast and Hojo to create an artificial version of a long-extinct race of beings known as the Cetra, or the Ancients. And Jenova, as Sephiroth believed, was the Cetra specimen they used in order to do so. The real icing on the cake, however, was that the Jenova Project's crowning achievement was none other than Sephiroth himself, supposedly the world's first artificially created ancient. Staying in the Shinra Manor and keeping watch while Sephiroth read, when Cloud eventually did check up on Sephiroth, he found a man possessed. This was fueled by a newfound belief that his mother and the Cetra had been betrayed by humans, beings he now believed were unfit to rule the planet. Based on this, Sephiroth proclaimed his desire to reunite with Jenova and bring about the retribution the planet deserved for crimes against it. With Cloud unable to reason with him, Sephiroth departed again from the Mako reactor, this time alone, and he was hell-bent on revisiting the sealed door bearing Jenova's name in the reactor's core. Exiting the mansion in pursuit, what Cloud described finding was almost beyond words. Sephiroth, with his newfound disdain for humanity and desire for revenge bubbling over, had proceeded to slaughter the people of Nibelheim, burning the town to the ground. While Cloud was able to help some of the inhabitants with the help of Tifa's martial arts instructor, Zangan, the horrors of Sephiroth's violence were almost too much to bear. Surrounded by billowing flames, the once legendary war hero simply turned to Cloud, smirked, and took off for the reactor. Following Sephiroth up the mountain to the reactor, it was outside the core that Cloud came across Tifa. She was standing over her father's lifeless body with Sephiroth's Masamune on the ground nearby. We learn that Tifa's father had been one of the few who tried to stand up to Sephiroth to hold him accountable for his actions, and he was summarily struck down for his troubles. Taking the Masamune into her own grief-stricken hands, Tifa then rushed at Sephiroth, attempting to take his life for what he had done to her father. Sadly, it was of no use. Sephiroth easily overpowered the teenage Tifa, slashing her across the chest and tossing her aside like a rag doll, before unsealing the door to Jenova's chamber and entering. Trying to help his childhood friend, Cloud tended to Tifa the best he could, but fueled with his own blind rage at the horrors he had witnessed and the circumstances he had found himself in, Cloud followed Sephiroth into Jenova's chamber, Buster Sword in hand, and revenge on his mind. He arrived just in time to witness Sephiroth dismantle the ornate angelic casing surrounding Jenova's tank, allowing for a first-hand look at her true, otherworldly nature. And it was here that Cloud's recollection of events ended. It led to many questions being answered, as while the Nibelheim incident itself was a secret to the rest of the world and was part of an elaborate cover-up, Shinra did acknowledge, via its official reports, that Sephiroth had died during his operation there. But as Cloud couldn't remember what happened between him and Sephiroth following the reunion with Jenova, and due to the fact that he actively doubted his ability to have killed Sephiroth himself, it was unclear at that point what really happened following the pair's confrontation. And the facts would only continue to become more unclear as the story unfolded. The issue with this recollection, as the player would later learn, was that it was neither the whole story, nor was it 100% accurate. When confronting Cloud inside the Whirlwind Maze, Sephiroth exhibited some intriguing powers to create an illusionary recreation of the Nibelheim incident. and what he showed proved to be quite earth-shattering. According to this reenactment, Cloud had unknowingly misrepresented the past when he put himself in the role of Sephiroth's soldier first-class comrade. The role was instead, according to Sephiroth, fulfilled by someone else altogether, a different soldier with spiky black hair, but who seemed to wield Cloud's signature Buster Sword. This illusion appeared to imply that it was not Cloud who fought the dragon outside of the town with Sephiroth, or who discovered the Macopods inside the reactor's core. It was someone else. Someone Cloud's version of events had left out completely, and what's more, Tifa's reaction seemed to add validity to Sephiroth's claims. As Cloud struggled to reconcile his memories with Sephiroth's reenactment, and Tifa struggled with her inability or unwillingness to communicate her version of the events, the proverbial knife was then twisted. Sephiroth showed Cloud a vision of the actual photograph that was taken before their expedition up the mountain, a photograph that featured the mysterious black-haired soldier, with Cloud nowhere to be seen. These revelations crushed Cloud's psyche, sending him into a spiral. There was clear synergy between what he remembered and what Sephiroth was showing, but why had he not only forgotten about this other soldier, but assumed his role in the story? But from the wider narrative, the other curious element was that this reenactment was also incomplete. Sephiroth had cherry-picked specific events and presented them in a theatrical way to obtain a specific result, the breaking down of Cloud's mental faculties. For example, Sephiroth failed to mention, either through ignorance or on purpose, that Cloud was present during the Nibelheim Incident. He also tried to make Cloud believe that he was a failed experiment, something fueled either by his own ignorant research or sheer malice. Nonetheless, Sephiroth achieved his target. Cloud became a broken man, and the only action left to take was for Tifa to insert her memories into the equation, so as to help Cloud unlock the truth about what happened. And to do this, the pair traversed the deepest recesses of Cloud's fractured mind in the livestream, following the destruction of the town of Mideel. It was here that we learnt much more about Sephiroth's death. Working with Cloud through his memories, Tifa explored their past together. This helped Cloud to reconcile many of the events that had happened both while he still lived in Nibelheim and those that happened after. It was through this that Cloud came to remember the name of the soldier Sephiroth had shown him, and the true chronological timeline about what happened in and around the reactor. It was a soldier first class named Zack who found Tifa injured and sought to confront Sephiroth inside Jhanova's chamber, and it was Zack who, mere moments later, was cast out, defeated. But that was when a new character was introduced, an unnamed Shinra soldier. Fueled by rage over the destruction of the town and what had happened to Tifa and Zack, this person picked up Zack's Buster Sword and entered Jhanova's chamber. Against all the odds, they confronted Sephiroth and attacked the legendary soldier with impressive gusto, stabbing him through the stomach and seemingly defeating him. Walking away from Sephiroth's crumpled body, the identity of this mystery person was then finally revealed to be none other than Cloud himself. Cloud was present for and remembered the events of the Nibelheim Incident, because he was the unnamed Shinra soldier who accompanied Zack and Sephiroth on their assignment to the reactor. At the time, Cloud had hid his identity from Tifa and the rest of the town because he was embarrassed about not making it into soldier. Now, in the metaphysical world of the livestream, he was able to confront the truth about his past at last. And the truth was that unfortunately, despite his impressive efforts, Cloud was too weak to cause any significant damage to Sephiroth, who emerged from Jhanova's chamber moments later, still alive and clutching what appeared to be Jhanova's severed head. Cloud then recalled how, after tending to Tifa, he pursued Sephiroth, but this time, Sephiroth was more focused and defeated the young upstart with relative ease. Impaling Cloud, things looked bleak. But surprisingly, through sheer will, Cloud was able to turn the situation around and leverage his extreme disadvantage to catch Sephiroth unprepared again. Using Sephiroth's own hubris and the fact he was currently physically connected to the Masamune, Cloud was able to knock Sephiroth off balance and into the livestream below, effectively killing him in the process. And it was with this final recollection that the main pieces of what really happened during the Nibelheim Incident were now more or less in place. Sephiroth, alongside fellow Soldier First Class Zack Fair and two Shinra soldiers, one of which was a young Cloud Strife, travelled to the town of Nibelheim to investigate an increase in monster appearances. Once there, Sephiroth discovered that he was a product of a secret Shinra experiment known as the Genova Project, and descended into a rage, murdering the inhabitants of the town and seeking to be reunited with the fossilized remains of Genova, who he believed was both an ancient and his mother. Though both Tifa's father, and Zack attempted to stop Sephiroth on his rampage, they would each end up severely injured or killed. And in the end, it was an enraged and grief-stricken Cloud that was able to put an end to the carnage, seemingly against the odds. But though this was all well and good, there were still a few questions that remained surrounding the incident. To start, why was Sephiroth sent on such a seemingly routine and mundane mission? And why was a second first-class soldier required? Additionally, what happened after Cloud managed to put a stop to Sephiroth in the reactor? And how was it that the town wasn't wiped off the map? Some of these questions were answered or at least implied through additional scenes and dialogue that was present within the original game. But perhaps because the developers felt as though there were still elements they hadn't been able to resolve, they decided to expand the Nibelheim Incident to add additional perspectives. And perhaps the most important perspective was that of Zack Fair. This expansion came via two properties that were released around the same time: Last Order, an OVA that accompanied Advent Children, and Crisis Core, a prequel game. Both properties would place the spotlight on Zack Fair, but as Last Order has since been classified as non-canon by the creators themselves, Crisis Core remains the main source of truth for how the Nibelheim incident played out through Zack's eyes. For its part, Zack's perspective of the Nibelheim incident followed the same major beats as the story outlined so far, but it did add some very important details. First off, the duel between Zack and Sephiroth that resulted in Zack becoming injured at the reactor was shown to be much more bombastic and drawn out than was depicted in Final Fantasy VII. Second, and perhaps most surprisingly, another soldier first class called Genesis Rhapsodus was also revealed to have been present during the incident, and was in fact the reason why Sephiroth had decided to join the expedition to the reactor in the first place. Intelligence believed that Genesis was behind the strange disappearances and monster sightings in the area, and as the two had history, Sephiroth wanted to attend to the matter personally. Appearing before Sephiroth and Zack in the reactor's core during their initial visit to the reactor, Zack's version of the incident showed that Genesis provided the pair with information about the Genova project, and more specifically about the two versions of the experiment known as Project G and Project S. Whereas Project G resulted in the creation of Genesis and his fellow first-class soldier Andy O'Hewley, it was from Project S that Sephiroth was created. This revelation left Sephiroth with more questions than answers, and Genesis's brief cameo proved to have a large impact on the course of the Nibelheim incident as a result, as it directed Sephiroth towards the Shinra Manor's library where he could begin his now familiar descent into madness. Outside of these revelations, the other thing that Crisis Core shed some light on was the aftermath, something that the original Final Fantasy VII only touched on briefly in some hidden, missable cinematics. Following Sephiroth's death at the hands of Cloud, Shinra's troops descended on both the ruined town and the reactor. In tow was none other than Professor Hojo, architect of the horrors Shinra had hidden there. Finding only Cloud and Zack gravely injured on site, as Tifa had already been evacuated by Zangan, Hojo abducted the pair alongside any survivors from the town itself, and spirited them away to the basement of the Shinra Manor, eager to begin new experiments relating to his reunion theory. What followed was 4 years of literal hell for many of these individuals. They were injected with Genova cells, with those who were deemed successful turned into Sephiroth clones and left to wander the planet until they were needed. But such a transformation did not take place in either Zack or Cloud, and the pair were left weakened and disorientated and classified as failed experiments. These experiments would also prove to be the cause of Cloud's amnesia surrounding the Nibelheim incident. He would end up with Mako poisoning, having undergone, ironically, an extreme version of what standard soldiers would be subjected to. Taking advantage of an opportune moment during their captivity, Zack was eventually able to break free from his captors and brought a delirious Cloud along with him. Dressing his injured friend in a set of soldier first class gear to reduce the amount of residual Mako poisoning, Zack snuck the pair out of a seemingly reconstructed and heavily guarded Nibelheim, intent on heading towards Midgar. What followed this escape was a worldwide chase involving Shinra, the Turks, and even Genesis, as Shinra attempted to recapture its escaped pet projects. but this chase sadly ended in tragedy on the outskirts of Midgar. Hiding an exhausted Cloud from sight, it was here that Zack made his final stand against an army of Shinra soldiers, instructed to take no prisoners. Fighting off wave after wave of elite Shinra infantrymen and heavy artillery, Zack eventually could fight no longer, and fell, thinking only of Aerith as he lay dying. Calling over to a Zack, barely drawing breath, Cloud was then bequeathed the Buster Sword as Zack finally passed on. This was when the Jenova cells inside Cloud kicked into gear, as when Zack passed away, they created a hybrid persona that was a melding of Cloud's own memories, hopes and dreams with those of Zack's. This process locked certain memories away and made Cloud believe others happened when they had not. And when Cloud made his way to Midgar and reunited with Tifa, she was wary of him from the outset, as even though there was a lot of similarity with the Cloud she knew, he remembered things he shouldn't and not things he should. Through these 4 perspectives, 5 if Genesis is included, the Nibelheim Incident has a much clearer chronology and cause and effect, but these aspects have continued to be added to via representations of the event in other pieces of media relating to the compilation of Final Fantasy VII. Among the more standout of these is the role the Turks played, as depicted in the 12th and 13th episodes of Before Crisis. Responding to reports that staff had gone missing at the Mako reactor, the story goes that the Turks were sent to investigate the strange goings-on, but upon the discovery of a formidable monster threat near the reactor, they were forced to retreat to the town and await both further orders and the arrival of Sephiroth's party. To further add to the intrigue, during this narrative passage, it was revealed that the Turks were the ones who contracted Tifa to act as Sephiroth and Zack's guide up the mountain. Following the ill-fated expedition and Sephiroth's villainous rampage, the Turks then continued to play an active role. It was them who cleared out the remaining monsters so that Shinra could attempt to take advantage of the mess that was unfolding. And through this, we learn that this didn't just relate to the actual happenings afterwards. As they were in the vicinity when everything went down, the Turks actually confronted Sephiroth in the reactor, but much like Zack, they were cast aside with ease. Realizing that there was nothing more they could do against such might, the Turks then proceeded to try and care for the victims who remained alive, including Tifa. They would also witness the final confrontation between Cloud and Sephiroth, and most intriguingly, Sephiroth's death. It was only after the confirmation of Sephiroth's demise that the Turks were instructed to oversee the cleanup operation, and in this regard, their involvement consisted of a number of shady tasks. This included, but was not limited to, disposing of sensitive and incriminating documents, as well as rounding up the surviving townspeople for Hojo's twisted experiments. Following these actions, to ensure no questions were asked about what had happened, Nibelheim was essentially rebuilt, and its populace was replaced by Shinra actors. As this cycle was now recurring, as a similar event had already happened in Calm, it led to certain members of the Turks questioning the morality of their actions. Some of these events were then expanded upon further within a more recent piece of media called Final Fantasy VII Remake: Trace of Two Pasts. Within Traces of Tifa, it's noted that an unnamed female member of the Turks saved Tifa from some monsters, but instead of hiring Tifa, she volunteered to guide the investigation team as a way of saying thank you. That then brings us on to Last Order, which we mentioned has been classified as non-canon, and for an interesting reason. The OVA focuses on Zack, but from the perspective of Sung. It sees Sung discussing his involvement in the Nibelheim Incident, while also touching on how he coordinated the pursuit of Zack and Cloud once they had escaped many years later. Through this, Last Order depicts Sephiroth's massacre of the town, the murder of Tifa's father, and it features an expanded view of the duel that happened between Zack and Sephiroth. Cloud would then stab Sephiroth as he spoke to Jenova's suspended remains, and like in the original version and the Crisis Core depiction, somehow Sephiroth would survive. But this was where things started to diverge. Sephiroth would appear holding Jenova's severed head shortly afterwards, and he launched a proactive assault against Cloud. The ensuing fight was depicted as short and one-sided in Sephiroth's favour, and again, it would conclude with Cloud impaled and dangling over the livestream below the reactor. Cloud would then take hold of the Masamune, drawing the sword further into his body to bring himself back from the brink, and he would twist himself, surprising Sephiroth to knock him over. But instead of this being the cause of Sephiroth falling into the livestream, Last Order showed Sephiroth jumping willingly into the livestream, clutching the head of Jenova. This key scene would serve as the main difference, as nowhere else in the compilation is Sephiroth's fall into the livestream depicted as intentional. With each of these elements considered, It's easier to see why the Nibelheim Incident serves as one of the most important events in the compilation of Final Fantasy VII, and perhaps the franchise as a whole. A startling majority of the game's core figures are intrinsically linked by this incident, both in terms of the actual sequence of events, but also the fallout. While it is true that most important and relevant details are gleaned from its original depiction in Final Fantasy VII, what's perhaps most interesting about the incident is how the developers have chosen to expand it as the compilation itself has also expanded. They could have just kept the narrative beat the same with each retelling, but through Crisis Core and Before Crisis, they provided a lot of substance to the background information that was only hinted at in the original game. And by doing so, they have served to underline the monumental influence Sephiroth's epiphany had on the trajectory of Final Fantasy VII. For our part, we hope we've been able to provide an in-depth and thorough overview of what really happened during the events of the incident, and how different perspectives have changed this over time. And as Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is right around the corner, we expect we will once again be treated to a wholly new version of these events. And it will surely be exciting to see how Square Enix will reimagine these grim happenings once again. With that though, thanks for watching, and be sure to let us know your views on the incident in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, also feel free to hit this like button and subscribe for more content. Alright everyone, with that, this is Darryl signing out. As always, I'd like to give a big thank you to all of our Patreon and YouTube membership supporters, especially Benjamin Snow, The Livestream, Gregory, Justin Dent and Sukun TDK, who are super special Onion Knight supporters. And of course, a big thank you to everyone for watching this video. I'll see you all again soon for more Final Fantasy goodness.